Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan, and I am back with another episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And I just finished this incredible conversation. Honestly, it was just a ton of fun, but also super detailed and full of information and insight from Joshua Ogundu, who's a good friend here in Los Angeles. We got together downtown LA to here in Hollywood. And today we talked about this idea of, can we use today's technologies? Can we use the most cutting edge kind of venture backable type approach to technology and the entrepreneurial economy and apply it to traditional industries? Can we apply it to solving some of our societal's biggest problems? Can we see opportunity in the physical world that we live in, the buildings, the roads, the highways, the infrastructure, et cetera? Josh is now starting a new company called Tradeway Tech, and that's his mission, is to work inside of the trades industries and apply all the lessons and learnings that he accumulated from his vast educations at USC and Michigan State, but also to bring all those kind of new age tech industry, software, AI type startup lessons into this traditional industry to transform it so that the things that these industries create are created more efficiently, more effectively, so that we help people to create better career paths inside of the trades, and so that the products and services and buildings and infrastructure that they build can be more cost affordable and accessible to the rest of us. So it's a fascinating conversation with a really good friend who you've probably been entertained by for years as Silicon Valley on TikTok and on X. But we dive into a real human conversation with my friend Josh, and I am hopeful that you will enjoy it as much as we did making it for you. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not know, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together, honestly, to try to figure out ways to just leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by my friend, Josh Ogundu, who is now the founder and CEO of Tradeway Tech, which he's going to tell us all about as we get into the conversation. But before that, let me tell you a little bit about Josh from my humble point of view. So in my view of life and the world here in Los Angeles and the entrepreneurial economy that we play in, I see Josh as a bit of a renaissance man in this kind of new digital era. From his bigger than life personality online, which has entertained millions of us with his funny kind of hot take pandemic era skits on social media and TikTok, to his operational leadership throughout his tech career, to his strong opinions, very insightful opinions, I may say, on some of our biggest cultural issues of the day, shared across various media platforms, to his now reinvention as the founder and CEO of this trades industry focused company, which we're going to talk a lot more about. He's, in my opinion, become a dynamic young force in tech and entrepreneurship world that belies his age and his experience. And he's doing it all from right here in Los Angeles as kind of an adopted son of this great big global city that we both love. As the CEO of Tradeway Tech, he's revolutionizing the construction industry by connecting it with tools and talents to boost safety and productivity. He's an unabashed believer in the idea that we can unleash more diverse and more sustained economic growth across the country by reinvesting in some of our most basically available resources: hardworking, talented craftsmen and tradespeople. With a career that spanned over a decade in product management and innovation, Josh's journey has taken him from launching startups and mentoring future leaders to now writing about the intersection of tech and culture for Afrotech, while building apps with impressive retention rates or mentoring entrepreneurs at institutions like his alma maters, Michigan State and USC. He really does ultimately just remain focused on creating impactful solutions for communities and industries alike, and then adding his own kind of personal flavor of telling those stories in the way that he does. So, Josh, with that said, buddy, welcome. It's great to have you on Entrepreneurial Thinkers.
Hey, yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. As you know, you and I have been friends for years and years now.
Exactly. We are like old school Twitter friends from back in the day when they used to call it Twitter.
Exactly. But free X.
Exactly. Absolutely. So no, it's great. It's great to have you here. We're connecting across Los Angeles today, which is always fun. We've had a lot going on here in our city and still do have a lot going on. But I think even in that context, as people know mostly about all the difficulties, challenges, fires, tragedies we've been having across the city, I think it also just kind of plays into this conversation that we're about to have, which is like, how do we look at kind of traditional parts of our society right? There's a lot of those questions happening at every level of government and industry and civic
Exactly.
leadership, local citizenry here across like Los Angeles is like, how are we going to look at the basics like building, rebuilding, infrastructure, housing, all those types of things, right? So it's kind of a fascinating time for you and I to be having this conversation, which isn't specifically about this, but I
Right.
think it will shed a lot of light on that. So, and you're good. You've been unscathed by everything, living downtown. You've
Yeah,
been
yeah, I'm in the downtown area, so relatively insulated due to the lack of brush that embers can then
yeah
cause to ignite and then flame.
yeah
But obviously, like everyone else in LA, have been affected by the air quality and the ash in the air. If you're a sensitive to it, like whether you have bronchitis, asthma, or any other respiratory issue, I think you've noticed it. Folks have probably reduced their running outside
yeah
because of that. But obviously, the people most affected, unfortunately, are those who lost like homes and memories in the
yeah.
fires all across Los Angeles. So hopefully, federal, state, and local aid and energy looks to bring back those communities and the energy of those people.
No, totally agree. And I've talked about this and posted about this quite a bit in the last 3 weeks, but so without sounding kind of unsympathetic to the reality on the ground, the truth is I'm actually rather optimistic, right?
Yeah,
I'm excited about the potential to rebuild people's lives first and foremost, right? And
yeah,
help them, but also just kind of I'm really proud and been excited about the way that the community has showed out for itself, which didn't surprise me or you
right.
because we've lived here. I've lived here almost half my life now. You've lived here for quite a number of years. Like
Yeah,
we
8 years
know,
now.
we know what LA is all about. Like, and
Exactly.
we know the not the BS that we see online. Like we know the real thing about Angelinos and how this is essentially really just a neighborhood city of people who, by and large, have lived here for most of, if not all, their lives, multi generationally. Just like every other big city in the country is, right? When you peel away kind of that top tier level,
Exactly.
so I'm excited for this potential opportunity to look at these neighborhoods, these portions of the city, the way that we deliver services and consume infrastructure and stuff like that, and do it differently,
Is
right?
that?
And
Do you typically try to see the bright side of natural disasters?
I mean, right? I gotta be honest. Like this is the first time in 3 weeks that I've actually been able to express a little bit of optimism.
Okay.
Like two weeks ago, I couldn't even like over the prior 2 weeks, I couldn't even bring myself to do like a post that said like Happy Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a Happy Tuesday. But I am at that point. Maybe it's just these 24 hours that we haven't had a new fire, right?
Yes.
Like maybe just that alone has given me a little bit of optimism on a Friday morning. But
No, I love that. No, I
um,
love that.
so all that being said, we've got a lot to discuss and unpack today, and so I want to jump right into kind of one of the big picture questions, like why should we treat the trades? And you can run with this in every direction you'd like to, but why should we
Yeah.
treat the trades more entrepreneurially?
Yeah, I think anyone that's making nothing into something is entrepreneurial. And that's like the core of what skilled tradesmen look to do is look to take the tools, materials that they have at their avail, and then be able to leverage that to build the places that we live, work, and play in. So, I mean, it generally is an entrepreneurial thing to do, even if one does not own their own general contracting firm. It is still an entrepreneurial pursuit in itself because those skills that you have, no matter where you can go, you can create. So I think if people look at it from that perspective, that it's rooted in entrepreneurial energy, then I think that helps guide a bit of the early conversation about it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, what drew you to it?
Yeah, so I used to actually work in residential construction. So when I was
Okay.
exactly, yeah. So when I was like 17, 18, back in Michigan, originally from Michigan, Southeast Michigan specifically, worked with my aunt and uncle who were handymen slash tradesmen themselves, primarily electrical by trade, and also handymen, handy women. So I would help them from time to time when I was not working my part-time job at Burger King during high school. So
Okay.
that was my entrance to it was very much connected to family, like many people who are exposed to and go into the trades. It's usually through a personal network exposure, whether it's family or friends.
100%. That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm as folks would know, I'm a significant chunk older than you, but we had some similar upbringing in the Midwest,
Yes, we did.
and a couple of my first kind of summer part-time jobs, hey, call your friend's dad and see if he can get you into that union gig for the summer, were like commercial construction type stuff, or even public works construction type stuff, right? Like, so one summer was working for the city of Chicago, one summer was working for this friend's dad's construction company, which I now almost say with a laugh, because yes, he was Italian, and yes, they were probably attached to the mob, and yes, there was like government mob contract stuff going on there. But hey, it was like going to pay me at the time in 1985 or 4, it was going to pay me like $17 an hour.
I mean, right? And all the dollars spend the same, even if connected to the mob.
Hey, I was like, I'm literally out here on a highway site with like an orange vest and a helmet, and I'm just pushing a broom. Like, bro, I'm not like. But to your point, right? You get exposed to the people that then this is their livelihood.
Yeah.
Right. This is where I was the high school and then later college kid passing through for the summer, trying not to fuck it up, right? But
exactly.
These are like good old school locals that are union people that are working class folks that they were taking care of the city. They were building the infrastructure. They were literally building the roads, bridges, highways, tunnels that made, in our case, Chicago what it was.
Exactly.
And you get exposed to it in a unique way that I think I wonder if you feel the same way. I kind of feel lucky to have been exposed to that part of the world at an early
age. I think it gives you a very different perspective, especially if you, like you and I, who ended up going the liberal arts route and really, going to college and things of that nature. Typically, people are not exposed to it, like I alluded to earlier. You're typically exposed to it, like you and I were, via our personal networks that we are already like born into and connected with via, our lineage. But I think it is good like that, especially with the ever evolving ecosystem, which is startups. I think there people are going to see more opportunity in building, within here. But the only exposure that people typically get is like, oh, I live at a place that was built versus actually knowing how it came to be in the first place.
Right.
So I definitely agree on the luckiness that exposure that you and I've had has been good for both of us.
Yeah, it gave us a wider lens on life, which I think is
100%.
No matter what you're building later in life, right? So, all right, so you just teased me. We're going to get back and we're going to talk a ton about trade. We're going to talk more about the trades, but I feel like it would be shameful of me if I didn't just let you kind of opinionate a bit for a while, right? Because you are a thought leader now, right? You're publishing regular columns in Afrotech, and I'm reading them, and it's kind of the next iteration of the different places that you have shared thoughts and opinions. And you used to do it maybe more humorously in skit format, and now some of that same tone and tenor is coming out in longer form. So I want to ask you, right? I feel like you've had, just because of when you hit the industry and your age and experience, like I feel like you had like a front row seat to kind of this break things, go fast, blitz scale, get as much money as you can kind of era that we've just come through. What do you think some of the enduring lessons of this wild era will be? And then do you think we'll ever return to those sorts of like super hyped up times again?
The funny part is I don't think we've learned any lessons. If you see what's happening in AI right now, it's the same blitz scaling. Let's put a lot of money behind the ones we think are going to win, like we saw in the world of crypto, like we saw in the pandemic with the future of work and remote work. And then we also saw even before that when people thought that VR and AR were going to be the next paradigms of connection and content consumption online. So I don't think we've learned anything, to be honest on that one. But I do think people are starting to think a little bit differently about areas of opportunity. I don't know if we're going to move away from like, oh, let's put all our money behind this thing. But maybe so, as like, technological advances stop being the bigger moat, maybe people will start thinking about things differently in that way. Like, there's, Bryce Roberts over at NDVC, who backed one of my companies before, like they've always thought about it differently. And I think more people are starting to
100%.
Think about it differently. And others in the ecosystem also have started being like, okay, how much money does a seed stage company need to really materially show any traction if we should put more money behind it? So yeah, I think that when it comes down to like lessons learned.
So kind of an interesting combination. So on the front end, not necessarily learning much, and basically maybe we took like 4 months off from the hype cycle, and then we just jumped right back into the pool with whatever the latest with the AI stuff, right? But maybe the combined factors of that, and then the macroeconomic environment changing, the changing interest rate climate, the the pullback on venture,
Yep.
overinvestment. So the combination of all those factors wind up leading to maybe a more pragmatic founder
We're
someday.
definitely going to have a more pragmatic way of looking at investing for
Okay.
sure. Because like with the interest rates thing, I think people believe since we have a more Republican leaning or honestly, moving kind of federal government that we're going to see like interest rates go down because Donald Trump requested so.
Yeah.
If people look at the last like 25 years of interest rates, all the almost zero interest rates were connected to calamity. The first
Yeah.
one you can see
Exactly.
the biggest drop was back in '01 with
Yep.
9/11. You
Yep.
saw it in '08 with the financial crisis, and then obviously saw it again coming into the pandemic. But as that, we're moving past those black swan events. I don't see us going past like what the 3 to 4% interest rate, Fed rate that we're at right now.
Yeah.
I don't see us going back to 0% unless we have another pandemic, and hopefully we don't.
Right. No, totally agree with that. And in the context of old guy context that I have, right? I mean, I can remember I can remember thinking 10 and 11% mortgages in the 90s were great deals. Were like, right? And my dad, God rest his soul, my dad could go back and think about, house and mortgage he probably had in the early 80s that was like 18 or 19%, right?
Exactly.
And thinking he was getting a deal. So I mean, it's all relative, but
It is.
that's funny. How do you personally, especially, and again, I'm not harping, sorry, on your age because I think your age is actually an asset, but
How
but
old do
like
you think
how
I am?
like what mid 30s?
Yeah, cool. I'm glad you
Yeah.
actually guessed that right. I'm like,
Yeah, okay,
I was
like
like,
no, it's pretty close, but like you got like my daughter's like 31 and a half, so it's
legit.
you're still I'm still almost old enough to be your dad, right? So like
Yes.
I'm basically just your big uncle, right?
Right, right, Loki.
But here's the question, right? Is so because you're in these streets,
Yeah,
kind of in the game a little bit more, right? Like
yeah,
then say I am definitely now because I'm doing this, but then maybe even older founders are who are more in
yeah,
more established industries. Like you're
yeah.
in that game of like you could have chosen, you choose paths, you chose Tradeway, you chose
Correct.
this focus. Like how do you fight that hype cycle? Like how do you not just wind up being at a cocktail party in Santa Monica and get sucked into like because everybody else around you is like stop talking about that shit.
Yeah.
Josh, like, come on, man, like, come build this AI thing with you and we'll back you with more money than you need. Like, how do you fight that pull to just be like, I'm going to move to El Segundo and tell everybody I'm building the country again?
Yeah. For me, it's because I started my career outside of major markets. So I
Mm,
started my career in Michigan, founded my first startup there. I got my first product job in DC. Then I subsequently moved to LA back in 16. So it's like I've always lived in places that were non-consensus. I've built my career from non-consensus places. Like most often, folks who are most bullish on AI, even if they live in LA, El Segundo, or New York, spend significant time in San Francisco, which has its own way of thinking that people see online. So I think part of that is comes from just from that, from choosing to go to places that made sense to me, even if there are areas that people think I should move into or spend time in. And that's also reflected in the companies I wish to found, because I think the time intensiveness, energy intensiveness, and like what it can do to candidly to one's finances is a risk that only should be taken if it's something that you thought about and made the consideration for yourself versus looking to latch on to the hype cycle, because when the
yeah.
hype cycle is over, bills still got to get paid.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of those chairs get pulled right out from under you when the music stops.
Exactly.
Right. And you're like, well, wait, I thought we were all on the same team. I thought we were playing the same game. And they're like, well, no, the game's over. We're moving on. Like, you're
Exactly.
sorry. Hey, but great job. You'll learn those lessons. It'll be better next time. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, and then you're stuck with the scraps of your career trying to rebuild a life
Trying to
from that.
rebuild your life while everybody
Yeah,
else has moved on to the next thing.
good for you. All right, so we talked about the trades industry as a teaser at the top. This is your commercial. Talk to me about Tradeway. I've followed it a little bit. I've tried to follow what you've been talking about. I
Yeah.
think if I'm in my interpretation, if I go out and researching Tradeway, there's not a whole lot out there,
There's
which
not a lot out there now.
I'm sure is very intentional on your part. So
Correct.
tell us what you can tell us. If you can't tell us things, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
But give us a sense of kind of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where it's going.
Yeah, so Tradeway, I've been working on Tradeway in some capacity since like late 2023. This is the company that I started working on after Campfire. I think you might remember a bit more
Yeah.
about Campfire since I worked on that more publicly over time. So closed down Campfire, started working on Tradeway. Thanks to the help of the team over at Bloomberg Beta, they're our first investor in Tradeway. So I really appreciate to Rory Bahat and team over there and partnering with them. So really, we started as a marketplace. The first thing I thought was that since we both talked about how familial and personal exposure is how one gets into the trades, I was like, okay, one, exposure is great. And how do you match people to opportunities that fit the things they may have done professionally or personally? So really, in some ways, you could look at it as like the LinkedIn for like early career trades talent is the way you could have looked at the marketplace model, although it was not based around social networking. It's based around discovering of opportunity mainly, and not connecting with other people who want to go into the field, because LinkedIn is more of a content engine. We're more of economic opportunity in a real sense. So we started with that. Then we joined Techstars. So shout out to Monica Wheat, who is our MD over at Techstars Detroit. As me being from Michigan, spent time over there, graduated from Techstars last year. So that was a great experience. Anybody who wants to look into accelerators, I definitely recommend looking into the variety of Techstars accelerators that are happening globally. So after that, during that program is actually when we started thinking about, okay, we are a marketplace. We can expose people to opportunity and help them discover opportunity and things of that nature. But we started seeing very interesting things in the world of AI. I am very big on technological trends are only useful if they're useful to you. So you really need to know when something makes sense for you to try to weave it in or see if it fits to your product suite or your offering. For us, with the chat box functionality, given that the work of field workers in the trades is outside and not sitting at your laptop, the chat box form factor didn't make sense to us. But once I started seeing more advances in computer vision, I was like, okay, how can we leverage one's phone camera as well as AI to help people identify tools on site, materials on site, and really give them a co-pilot to help them build the physical world. So for us, the talent piece is still around the marketplace and really, looking to help folks discover opportunity. But I think the real way to reduce a labor shortage is to change the way in which the work is done. So being able to change the way that one actually builds the world around us, I think will bring more people to it over the long run, and ultimately change the way that it feels to work in the skilled trades, at least from a residential perspective, which is where we're focused on now. So that's really what we're really ultimately up to, is really how do we increase the productivity of those in the skilled trades. And first, people think it's like bring bodies to site. But you have to think about that. Every fresh body on a construction site is also a liability if they're not trained enough.
Trust me, I was that liability a couple times in my young life. I was like, how do I even clip the tool belt, right? Like, you didn't.
How was that for you, though? I'm curious on your end. How was that for you when you first stepped on site? Like, how was that?
Scary as shit. Like frightening like 16, 17 years old, right? Where you think you know everything about everything. And then you show up with, like, as we used to say in Chicago, like, you show up on a work site with a bunch of grown ass fucking men.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like feeding their families based on the shit they get done and what they got to get done that day.
100%.
If you can't add to that, like, you are, oh no, are you like that first gig that happened again through those relationships that we mentioned, and my dad saying, like, go talk to Jimmy's dad. Like, I was like, no, Dad, I don't want that job. Like, and he's like, you want it? This is the very 80s comment. Like, I'm going to date myself here, right? You want to put that stereo system in your mom's car this summer that you're going to drive? Like, then you're going to pay for it. So you got to go get that money. And this is the easiest place for you. I'm like, I'll go do anything else. Like, let me go sell ice cream at the Baskin Robbins. Like, please, right?
What were the other options that you were thinking of?
It was literally that. It was that. It was like retail. Like, there was a Baskin Robbins up the street. I had friends that worked at Burger King. It's funny you mentioned Burger King, because we had our little area on the edge of the northwest side of Chicago didn't yet have a McDonald's, like within 5 miles. So
you had Burger King.
So Burger King was the thing. Like, that was my jam, like right down the street. And so I had a couple buddies from high school, a couple girls that I knew that went to work at Burger King. But I never like entertained that, because I was like, no, I like eating here. I don't want to work here. Right?
Yeah, working at Burger King, I feel like it would change the way you look at the food.
Right. Yeah. So no, it was Baskin Robbins, and then I think ultimately another job wound up being like doing some work around our school, like my grade school and the church. Right. So like I
There we
wound up
go.
doing that, which was a lot. I liked that job a lot better. But that summer, it was like that 8 weeks of working on that construction site, and this was a big, huge contracting company that they did industrial stuff. So they did government contracts and they worked on roads and then like road infrastructure and so I like it was scary as shit, man. It took me probably 4 of those 8 weeks before like the guys accepted me and I like actually was doing something that was additive to the equation. And then as you probably remember, then like when I went back home and all I would do during the summer was play basketball, like play ball in my off hours. So then when I would go back to my buddies to play ball that night, like after work, then I felt like a badass. Right? Like, because then I was like, now I'm like, all right, I already know I'm a badass at basketball and being a teenager, but now I'm a badass with these grown ass men. Like,
I'm grown now. I'm a man.
Louis, and I didn't want to. I like Louis and I didn't need to know what Louis and Tony were doing that night when they went out, right? For their, but just that whole like vibe of, but to your original question, like it was very discomforting.
Yeah.
And I would, knowing my personality, I imagine I would have felt the same way had I been like an apprentice tradesperson trying to get a job like for a life there, right? Like those first couple of weeks, like I literally felt overwhelmed by, I didn't know anything. Like I didn't, all of a sudden, like, you know, knowing what a hammer was at home in my parents' toolbox, and then knowing what a hammer was and how it was supposed to be used and what it was supposed to do and what it wasn't supposed to be used to do on site at a job site where there are pressures to build shit, right? Like that was a completely different experience. So if what you're telling me is, if I'm hearing it right, Tradeway is in many ways designing technologies to enable the more rapid, efficient adoption or integration of new bodies on site, new people on site at job sites, like, and do it in safe, efficacious like ways. Like, wow. I mean, that's
what we're ultimately looking to do. And you know, I wasn't able to even think like this back in, you know, late 2023 because the models weren't out, the capabilities weren't out, and the focus was very much on how do you leverage the chat box functionality of Chat GPT in anything. And I couldn't justify spending time like that and like candidly like capital like that. Because it just doesn't make any sense. So that's the way that I looked at it. But that's why we see an opportunity now, because the form factor as well as the technology and the greater opportunity, increased productivity now makes sense in a way that it's super easy, because on job sites, people have their phones. The large language models can now be run on locally on devices, which is very helpful for us to be able to like people to actually use it and run it in the field. So that's kind of what Tradeway's up to. And, you know, we're really early in our journey. Shout out to Service Titan, the first $1 billion, you know, event in the category when it comes down to skilled trades. And they've been building out here in Glendale for like, you know, a better part of 13 years. So it's good to see more activity in the space. And it's good to see that people are also seeing the great financial opportunities in the space as well.
I remember back, you'll appreciate this side story. I remember back, and this is, you know, 20 years ago almost. And I'm coming out of a period in software where we were focused on different point solutions. Some of them were like customer service, help desk, those types of things, kind of before it all became CRM, right? And I remember even then, like the earliest adopters, like your Palm Pilot type stuff.
I remember those.
And then eventually, you know, the iPhone in like that later 2007, 8 era. But I remember hearing from let's call them service industry companies, right? So not necessarily just construction, but like broadly field services, as a whole category possibility of automation and software development. And I would imagine you've now run smack into that, like in 2025. 20 some odd years later, like, and you're now playing in the midst of that, because like that's a space that like a Service Titan is dominating in many ways.
Because people can now do that kind of work. I mean, if you think about Procore, which is also based here in Southern California, but primarily does like around commercial construction kind of stuff, and every GC leverages Procore on that side. They had to actually go and install Wi-Fi on site at the places they were trying to sell into, because you know, Wi-Fi, mobile, things like that weren't really as proliferated in the world of construction on site in that way. So they're installing like Wi-Fi so people can use their service. But
Yeah.
obviously now we have better internet, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. So they had to really strong will it in there, and like Procore did work in that way, which helped Service Titan. Service Titan has done work, especially from a business model perspective, because we also are leveraging software as a service as they do, selling to that category over the last 15 years. Now has made it even easier for folks like myself, Tradeway, and others who are looking to build a construction tech to come into the space. So people lay the groundwork in the bricks.
Yeah,
No pun intended.
And to your point, and maybe unintentionally to my kind of chronological framework that I laid out there by accident, like the reality is, and this is something I know you appreciate, again, in spite of maybe kind of coming from a generation which has seen the world as like everything is just a hype cycle and it's all just replaceable, and like you have that Midwestern core in you that you appreciate that the transformation, right, or the disruption of traditional industries like that takes decades. Like, I mean, these things unfold over 10, 20, 30, 40-year periods,
Exactly.
right? And what you've done is you jumped into a stream that was flowing, that I maybe saw the early like leakage of, that was the beginning of the stream back in the, around the 2000s. And now you're jumped into it. And yet it is still full of opportunity. It is not saturated.
100%.
It's not even close to saturated. So
people have stayed away from the category. I think founders and investors have stayed away from the category because they haven't seen billion-dollar exits in it, honestly, until Service Titan. I think people are waking up to the opportunity more than likely because the B2B SaaS white collar focus that a lot of investors and founders have had for a better part of, let's say, 15 years now. Honestly, probably 17 or 18 years, but better part of, 15 to 20 years now is like, not as efficient as it used to be because software doesn't have the same control power and standing power like it used to alone. So I think people are waking up to the opportunity. That's why you see more VCs talking about like we're investing in legacy industry software kind of things. That's mainly been around manufacturing for the most part, but would love to see it expand to other types of legacy categories as well.
No, I love that. It's it's fascinating too, because there's another phenomena that we've lived through, that you've lived through, that we've lived through together these last, like you said, 15, 20 years. We what you've essentially done by tapping back into your like original work experiences and those exposures is you've done as a founder now, this time around, what was up until, in my humble opinion, about that financial crisis era, about that 2008 forward, was the common way that people became founders pre 2008. Like, so from, let's say, 2008 back to 1995 and the internet was because they worked in an industry and they saw an opportunity in an industry that they worked in. And then they took all those experiences, either like whatever age or and they brought that and they said, like, I was the VP of such and such at this company and I saw this problem repeated for a decade and now I'm going to solve it. Right. We got into like a whole era from 08 to like 2022 or 3, where we just suddenly churned out like college kids who were sitting around on whiteboards going like, what idea should I have? And I'm like, dude, like that's, you can't accurately solve most of society's real problems or opportunities by just like whiteboarding like idea sessions. Like that's
I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that because something I always recommend to people is to work before founding for a variety of reasons, but I'll just give you two. One, work experience gives you credibility when looking to build. And then two, what problems are even there. There's only so many problems that you can see without living them. You can research as much as you want to across a variety of verticals, look at any white paper or McKinsey report, but there are certain things that unless you live life, you cannot fully understand the nuances of. Like, for example, in our category, people are like, okay, I've seen people try this before. It's like, oh, let's convince people who are high or who are working, who could go to college to come over and try to like go into the trades. I fundamentally believe people looking to go to liberal arts and go into trades are just two different people trying to convince 100%
people, and not in a judgmental good versus bad one, like, but just 100% true.
It's just like what they want to do, how they want to spend their time, how they want to spend their life. It's just very different nuances in that, which you only understand if you've seen both sides. If you only see one side that you don't really understand, and then obviously people in our industry have more than likely only seen the liberal arts path. the liberal arts path. So like, that's something I really do agree with. And I think we're going to go back to that due to the people seeing the opportunities that people are seeing now, especially with AI. People are like hiring PhDs like nobody's business. That we're going to go back to a time where exposure was key into like building things. Like when I was at USC, when I was at B School at USC, a lot of our prior folks who came in there as speakers were folks who like, yeah, worked in this industry for X amount of time, saw it, did this. Like and I don't know why people don't invest in people like that anymore. But I hope we get back to that.
Yeah, no, and I'm completely with you. And I'm like my little added bonus on top of what you just said. I'll just add. I think it's inevitable that we get back to this, whether it's a cyclical thing that churns out another generation next 20, 30 years, or it becomes a permanent shift in some ways. Then you just have, like you said, a bifurcation of paths, right? Yep. But I think I'll add, I think another reason that it's inevitable that we head back this way and that we get to people who understand industry's problems and opportunities, working on them and being financed to go ahead and trying to build them, is because I think fundamentally the problems and opportunities that we are now right in the face of are bigger and going to become more societally dominant than ever, right?
Oh,
and
100%.
so I'm feeling, and maybe again, little recency bias because of our last 3 weeks here in Los Angeles, but like it's one of the reasons that even for the last 10, 15 years, I've always been so fascinated and frankly impressed by people that have been working in or dedicate themselves to working in climate or green tech or green energy, right? Because I'm like, if you meet those people, like I am always the least smart person in those rooms. I walk away from like a day at Lacey in downtown and I'm like, okay, I am actually feeling better about the future of our planet and our species' ability to live here because these people understand this shit. They've worked in it. They know it. They're obsessed with it. This is all they want to work on, right? Yep. They're not just like in it to create an app or to create some AI widget thing or something, right? And I think I think what you're tapping into with Tradeway is going to be kind of a harbinger of more of this. And again, and this is not making you the water carrier on this, but like if smart, young, liberal arts educated guys who just as easily could have just stuck with the kind of financial path plan, right? If guys like you start to step out and go like, no, like I was exposed to this when I was 16, 17, 18 years old by family members in the construction business. Like, I think I'm going to go kind of back to my roots and also bring all my innovation and USC education and all that stuff. I think that bodes very well for us all going forward, which is really exciting.
I'm seeing more.
Right. I think it's inevitable, man. Like, because our problems / opportunities are just too big.
What like, outside of climate?
We're not going to solve them by just, like housing, infrastructure, transportation, right? Like transit, goods, movement of goods and services, shipping products, all those things. Like we're on the edge of like, oh shit, maybe this whole trickle down thing didn't work for the last 45 years. And we're going to have to figure out a new way to function, like as an economy, as a society, as workers, all that. I think this next 50 to 75 years is going to again be fascinating, but also potentially very risky. But in that, I think it's going to pull the smartest people amongst us, like yourself and others. Like it's going to pull you to want to just solve the like. I don't want to sit in my apartment and look across the street and think like, oh, society is collapsing around me and we're not building things effectively anymore. And everything that we build is too expensive and we're not being efficient with building materials and we're not being climate oriented with building. But it's okay because I'm up here in my penthouse apartment and I'm building this stupid fucking customer service app so more people can buy more shit that they don't need online.
Exactly.
Like that's that. Like I those people will always exist and venture will always fund them. But I also 100%. Think there's a path forward where people like you kind of who've lived on both sides kind of start to go, hey man, like fund me over here. Like fund me over here. Like for the same set of reasons you funded me over there, fund me over here because I'm actually going to make some real impact that frankly is going to leave this world a little bit better place for, hey, Mr. Venture Capitalist or Miss Venture Capitalist, can leave it better for your kids and your grandkids.
That's how I look at it. I think we are getting to a place where, obviously impact investing has been popular, but I think you can make money while doing good. And I think with us, if we reach our mission of empowering the residential construction industry with productivity tools, which increase that. Think about the things that can be built. If you're a parent, there's a parks that can be built. If you are someone who's looking for a job, commercial buildings are where people house, offices and things of that nature. I've told people for, a while now that the goals that if you want people to reach our economic goals, our AI goals, and our climate goals, you can't reach our AI, climate, or economic goals without hitting our construction goals.
I mean, dude, literally, how are we? I was talking about this with someone last night, probably because your interview was on my head already, but like we are literally every city across the country, the top 50 cities, is staring at millions and millions of square feet of derelict, underutilized, or unused commercial space that we wildly overbuilt because we just thought that was going to be the world, and now we've woken up and realized that's not the world anymore. And we have to repurpose, we have to adjust, we have to deconstruct, we have to reconstruct, we have to remodel. Like that in and of itself is like a trillions of dollar type of opportunity.
Exactly. And we already have a large labor shortage across commercial and residential construction. So if we don't increase the productivity as well as bring more bodies into it, we're going to be staring at a crisis that will fundamentally and materially change the quality of life for every single American going forward. You'll feel it. People think they won't feel it until they really feel it. I mean, housing is expensive because of lack of supply.
The way that you just said it, I think, is what I was trying to say. You just said it more succinctly than I did before. Like we're on the edges, the front end. Like I'm like, I think we got half a foot in the water now of feeling it.
Yeah,
like,
and it's gonna keep happening.
We're only gonna dip the whole body eventually in the water.
Exactly.
And we're gonna be underwater with this feeling. So we're like, yeah, that's 100% true. All right.
Shout out to Florida.
Oh my God, Jesus! Okay, don't even get me started. That's a whole other podcast for you and I. All right, so we talked about trade. We talked about trades in general and our philosophies on that. I want to talk a little bit about you personally for a bit before we kind of get to our latter segments here. But like you were infamously, dude, you were the funny TikTok guy. Like you were the online skit guy, roasting the tech industry with these like super savvy, subtle, smart humor. Yes. Right, that if you weren't paying attention to the smartness, you still got to laugh. But if you were paying attention to the subtle, like you really got to laugh, right? Like, and where did that performer streak in you come from?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in the arts. So I grew up playing percussion and trombone. So I started with trombone. I was bad at that. Then I switched over to percussion. I did some like plays in high school every now and again, but mainly was in music versus theater. So the performance part comes from like writing music, performing music, all that kind of stuff. I never really did anything comedic until probably freshman year of college at Michigan State. And we were like, making YouTube videos, and it got attention for real. It got more attention than my music did. But I still kept doing the music thing for some reason. But I got back into it because, when you're very focused on your career, you tend to throw a lot of things to the wayside. So you wake up one day and realize you don't really have any hobbies that are not connected to the industry in some fashion. So when I started making TikToks, it actually wasn't tech related at all. The ones that people have seen were tech related, but they didn't start that way. And the tech related ones are the ones I put on Twitter. There's a catalog that only people on TikTok have seen. But yeah, so that's kind of where it started for me. Is like I want to have something to do that's not so serious. Because for me working in product before I started founding companies, it's a relatively intensive and serious thing to be in. So that's kind of where your energy ends up leaning towards. But now I wanted that outlet, and I'm glad that I was able to leverage it.
I love that. I know you were super close with your mom, right? I know that from our relationship. Like,
correct.
Did you have some particular like artistic or creative inspirations or influences in your life when you were a kid, or was this just how you found your way through like high school and stuff?
Yeah. But also shout out to my mom. She unfortunately passed away about 3 years back now. So her name is Kelly Farley. So RIP to her. But yeah, she would be proudly watching, listening to you on this for sure. Yes. She was always a fan of that kind of stuff, and she was the biggest supporter of my creative endeavors growing
Okay.
up in that way. But yeah, I think neither my mom, dad, or really anyone in my family was really drawn to entertainment. Nobody's really done music or anything like that. So not sure where it came from on my side, but I got it.
Yeah. But she encouraged you. I mean,
Yes.
there's lots of things. There's lots of things that my daughter has done in her life that I couldn't do if you paid me to do it, right? But I encouraged her to pursue it, to love it, to experiment with it, and that becomes the juice behind it, right? So
Yep.
good for you. That's awesome. Have you found like kind of in the business world? Have you found this because you are a talented
Yep.
communicator. Like you work at it and you have a skill that is clearly I've watched just in the years I've known you. I've watched you get better at it.
Yep.
I like your writing that I read now is better than stuff that I saw from you 4 or 5. Like
Yep.
you are a skilled communicator and you work on it. Have you found that kind of performers capability, storytelling strength that you have to be useful in your management career, to be useful in your business career as a founder?
I would say so, yes, because I think being succinct is very helpful, especially if you're working asynchronously, as people tend to do nowadays. But being succinct, getting to the point, but people getting the value that they need, I think has been helpful. And me, doing video, audio, text with the articles with Afrotech, and then whatever we call what happens on X. I guess microblogging was what it used to be
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's been very helpful on the communication front, and it also lets you know, like, whether it's topics on videos, articles on Afrotech, or just music in general, the audience is different. So being able to communicate in a way across mediums that can hit the audience that you want to hit in the way in which you want to, I think is a skill that's been helpful for me and helpful for anybody that wants to like create things for a living, because you always got to bring people to your side, and the only way you can do that is by communicating why they should.
No, it's the old adage, right? My dad said it to me when I was a kid, right? We're all salespeople, whether we want to be or not, right? And and
100%.
and 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 his point, because he knew he was about to basically train me to become one for a living, right? He was like, so the sooner you figure out that you are one, and accept that, and then figure out how to use that for your own devices, like the better, right?
Yep.
But we all are. So basically, even the folks that are resisting it, like ultimately, you got to sell that teacher on why they got to give you that extension on that paper. You got to sell that boss on why you get that job. You got to sell that investor on why they should invest in you. You got to sell that teammate on why they should come work with you. You got to sell that
Yep.
customer on why they should. Yeah, it's always present, right? Sell that girlfriend or guy friend
On why they
on
should
why
be
they
with
should
you.
go on that date, right? Exactly. Like, and then you got to keep reselling that one over
Right. You got to
years,
keep.
right?
Yeah. That's never a one and done. That's a continuous sales job. That's a
Yeah.
sales cycle that never ends.
100%. If you want to be good, if you want to be good at it, if you want to have those
Yeah,
sustained
exactly.
relationships,
Exactly.
right? Like trust me, there was a couple of points in my life where I thought it was like a one and done thing, and that came back to bite me in the ass later.
Gotta
I was
keep
like,
selling.
oh
Gotta
shit,
keep selling.
I was supposed to be working at this all these years. Oh man. But all right, so I got one last question before we get to our closing segment.
Yeah.
I referred to you in the opening bio as an adopted son of Los Angeles because I completely think you are. Both the city has adopted you and you've adopted it. And you're making your way from here. It doesn't mean you'll be here forever, but you are here now, and you are making the most of an impact here on the community. You and I are both proudly. We have a phrase here in Los Angeles that we all use called the hashtag like Long LA,
Yep.
and it's a fundamental belief in kind of the long term. Like I always say, it's my 50 to 100 year view, which people tease me about because they're like, you're not even going to live to the 50-year end of that, right?
I mean,
But
none
I'm
of
like,
us
yeah, but
are.
that's the
I
whole
mean,
point.
realistically, none of us are. But okay.
That's the whole point. Like my whole point is I'm not just focused on the world that serves me. I'm focused on the world that is left for you all, and then where you take it and where my new grandson
Exactly.
takes it. And like that's so why? Let's talk a little bit about why, if you can. Like, so why what is it about Los Angeles, or why do you, like I do, why do you believe so much in the potential or the long-term potential of the entrepreneurial economy here? And then if you can, kind of what combination of factors do you think exist here that makes it such a unique place?
Yeah, the reason that I'm most bullish on LA because it has the two things that can really control outcomes at large, which is the content you consume and the technologies that you use. As we know, via Carter, that LA has come up to what top four, top five when it comes down to venture capital investment quarter over quarter, and really just neck and neck with Boston. And Boston's med tech heavy, so I mean, that's how that skews and how that goes. So I see that opportunity in the entrepreneurial ecosystem that is diverse. It's not just heavy on one or the other, like it used to be just very, very much content. But now we have a lot more manufacturing from a tech startup perspective. Obviously, we've had Boeing here for a while, and other aerospace manufacturers as well. So I think the diversity of industry here is a good opportunity, which is, what made me most bullish on it when I first came here, as well as like having my own affinity for entertainment. The things that I do think that LA has that will increasingly make it a place that has opportunity is that and this is more of a Hollywood entertainment side of things, since the studios are being a lot more conservative, social media is a lot more proliferated. I believe we're going to see a lot more independence be able to grow and show audiences what they want to do on more, I think, indie like platforms like like Tubi. I think TikTok might get into it. YouTube probably has it. So there's a lot of places that people can expose themselves to, be creative and take the shots that the conservativeness of the entertainment industry as to like fresh stories and stuff like that may not be the right thing. The second one, I think, is the attention that the rest of the globe via our sports wins have been happening. Obviously, we got the World Cup coming up in some years. We got the Olympics coming up as well. So I think that energy has been helpful as well. We've bunch of championship kind of stuff. So more and more people are seeing the diversity that LA has, and that it's not just a place for entertainment. And then lastly, I do think that the people here is probably the biggest strength. And I think when we think about people, especially from technologists, they tend to think about the people who have moved there. I tend to think about the people who were born here, especially since I live on the east side of it. And I really, mad friends who were born and raised here generation after generation. I think the strength comes into the opportunities that have come with people coming in, whether it's like, tech folks from SF, New York, Midwest, the Midwest, or like folks who are seeing this opportunity in the world of Hollywood to build and build new IP, since Hollywood seems to not know how to creating new IP for some reason. And then last is just like the people and us all rallying around each other. Donation centers are full. Donations are going up on GoFundMes and things of that nature. So I think the diversity of opportunity and the variety of people, I think, is one of the biggest strengths that Los Angeles has. And as you can see, I did not say the weather because
no,
exactly
right. And we can't control that, and that's going to continue to change, and that's going to change everywhere. So like it was snowing in Florida this week, right? I mean that's a whole other thing, but no, it is true, right? I mean, in 30 years ago, somebody would have said the weather, and that would have been just kind of the naive, easy, short-sighted answer, right? But I love the depth and richness of what you just described, and completely concur. Those are the reasons that I fundamentally believe in the city as well. I think I read something last year. I think that if you looked across the top 20 industrial categories in the world, like just in traditional economies, if you looked across like the top 20 different industrial categories, LA is in every one of those is in the top 4. Right. So like it's like so like again, misnomers that people don't believe, right? Like the California,
they don't believe it.
Southern California, right? That we're bringing back manufacturing in the U.S. and people always think that means like a plant in Alabama or a plant in Wichita, and it's like California is the largest manufacturing economy in the world. Right, like Southern California, Los Angeles. Like, so we always, like you and I, we always talk about, people in the public always talk about, California, fourth largest economy in the world. We'd be this country, blah blah blah. And I'm like, if LA County was a country, we would be today the 17th largest country in the world. So forget the rest of the state, like just this area
alone. The county alone.
But to your point, the fabric that ties it all together.
Also, I did not know that. Thank you for that tidbit.
Yeah. No. I like that one because it kind of narrows the focus down a little bit, right? But it's to your point. The fabric that ties it all together is people, is Angelenos, whether adopted, transplanted, newly here, or born and raised here, multi-generational, like some of the poor folks that have lost their homes out in Altadena and the Pasadena. I mean, those are neighborhoods where like family stories that you're hearing about Altadena almost don't sound like stories from Southern California, because you don't think that there are neighborhoods where like 6 generations of African American families would live on the same street and would have like passed the houses down from and like still live on the same street within a house or two of each other. And it's like that sounds like Chicago. That
sounds like a historical black enclave.
Right. It sounds like Detroit. Yeah, it sounds like Detroit in the 1930s and 40s. It sounds like Chicago. It sounds like Boston for the Irish. And yet that's the beauty and mix of Los Angeles. So thank you for sharing that perspective.
And I'm glad that you brought that up as well.
No, it's and again, I'm not usually optimistic about natural disasters, right? But like there are some proof points that are being presented to us again, which I think humbly, and this is one of the reasons I do what I do with this platform and this show, right? Is I think it's our obligation for those of us who do understand this and who see it and who know it to amplify this story and these stories to the world. Like, so because we're fighting a counter narrative that is going to land here in Air Force One later this afternoon, who is going to spin this place as a hellscape and as like the 17th level of hell in Dante.
He definitely is about to.
And that's just, that's frankly to me, forget you, like that's disrespectful fundamentally to the fabric of what this city has been for, oh, by the way, just 4 years younger than the United States is as a country.
Also a tidbit I did not know, and also agree with that is highly disrespectful about what's about to happen.
The original, like we'll be celebrating our 250th anniversary as a country in this next year. We'll be celebrating our 246th anniversary birthday of the Pueblo de Los Angeles, not far from walkable from your neighborhood, right? And that is like, those two things cannot not be known. Like, to me, those are fundamental truths about what we're talking about, not just the things that we move and trade on today in 2025, but the hit that's Los Angeles.
Agreed. 100%.
So yeah, thank you for helping me highlight that. All right, one kind of bullet point, last question for you, and then we'll get you on your day. This is more of kind of a practical answer, so maybe a little bit more actionable. A couple of takeaways for people who are listening. So we've talked about so much. We've talked about how to move into industry, how to think differently as a founder or a creator or an entrepreneur. Give me 2 or 3 practical steps that you would recommend for someone who's looking to start being more of an entrepreneurial thinker, maybe just in their job, right? Or in their industry, either way. 2 or 3 steps for someone that maybe they're in the construction industry, maybe they're in the commercial real estate industry, maybe they're in entertainment, and maybe they have a job, or maybe they already are kind of entrepreneurially, but like, give me 2 or 3 practical recommendations for how someone can become more of an entrepreneurial thinker in their industry.
Yeah, I would say the first one is to develop curiosity if you don't have it already. An actionable way to develop curiosity is just taking time to step outside of the lane in which you work in. So say you're working in accounting at a big 3 accounting firm and you're in accounts payables. Hey, I'm in payables. What's happening in receivables? I think just being curious about the work that's happening around you, I think can help develop that curiosity. Again, if you don't have it already, hopefully folks who are listening to this podcast, and I imagine if you're listening to this podcast, you're more than likely already somewhat curious, because discovery of podcasts are hard. They need to fix that on Spotify and wherever else podcasts are. But I would say that's I would say curiosity on that. And then second is to actually have executed on that curiosity. So say you see something that's happening in receivables and you're in payables, or you're an engineer who's curious about, who's like, oh, what do designers do? What does my PM do all day? Or the real question is, what do the other non-engineering parallel folks do? Because that's what a business is, because people get to in the minutiae of product all the time and don't think about the business. So I think generally industry-wise, be more curious about the business and not just the product of the business. And I think that can be helpful as well. So it all blends itself back into curiosity, but I think the first step of curiosity is being curious about the world in which you live in and day out, and taking time to step out of that from a functional level. And then secondly, looking to just look at your company that you work at, or organization you work at, as a larger entity outside of the swim lane that you're in, because then that will help you have a better appreciation for the happenings around you.
No, that's super insightful and very actionable, like easily applied by anybody to go back into their workplace next week and start thinking about themselves and how they interact and consume with the work and the life that they live. So that's awesome. Thank you. Hey, man, I knew you were going to bring the energy today. So this is not a surprise that we both just delivered a great energetic show. I'm grateful. Like I look at these conversations as something that I get to do as opposed to I have to do.
I would hope so.
And you right, and you may now be aware of this because you and I follow each other pretty often back and forth. But like this is my thing now, right? I joked with someone a couple of weeks ago. I was like, yeah, I used to be a guy who had like coaching and ran a consulting agency and did this stuff, and then had a podcast on the side. And then about 6 months ago, I decided like this is how I want to make my living. And this is what I want to do, is telling these stories and exposing people to people like yourself, but from my own different kind of lens on life. So
I'll ask you a direct question too. Was your podcast inspired by your Rob walks?
No, not originally. So the long history story is, so this is, you'll be episode 151. And so this has been playing out over about 4.5 years, but originally it was an adjunct to our consulting business. Okay. So the consulting work that we did across Latin America, where we basically got hired by big entrepreneurial organizations or by like governments or universities to help craft mentorship experiences and programming for them. The original incantation of this show was called Mentors Today. And it was a different format and a different vibe, different format. And so that was it. And it was essentially kind of a lead generator, right? It was a like, let's talk about what we love talking about with the people. And it did that. But then it was the end of 2023 going into 2024 when some circumstances had changed. And then I'm 56 now instead of I was 49 then, right? So like life changes. And I just came around to, and then Deanna, our producer, helped me kind of craft this idea that I want to talk about and think about, to your point, humbly, I am more curious about more things in this life and in this world than just entrepreneurs and investors.
Yep.
I'm deeply curious about entrepreneurs and investors, and I believe we need more of both. But I also fundamentally believe that we don't just need more of both.
100%.
We need more. We need more people who, like yourself or like others in other industries, can tap back into something in their life experiences and or their career or their day jobs, and can find the things that we need to fix and get better, right? And so I just was like, okay, that's what this new. And then it's just been this iterative thing of, no, the Rob stories, where the Rob stories are going to pop up between you and I and whoever's listening today, like the Rob stories are going to wind up popping up in a book.
Oh, I love that. See, I've seen more and more folks getting into the book situation. Yeah. So I think any story worth telling should be somewhere that people can read it and not only listen to it.
Right. I didn't. It's funny you say this, and this is a rare circumstance where I've talked this much about myself, but I didn't think about it this way. But I've now tied up with a literary agency through a friend in Mexico City, and they're going to help shepherd me on this process. But I did not think of the Rob stories in that context. But when we met and we started kind of building out the profile and brainstorming on ideas, it was the first thing they attached to. And I'll be curious your reaction on this. So one of their concept ideas, don't know how this will play out or what form it'll exactly take, but one of their concept ideas is they look back and they're like, dude, you've already written literally probably 4 books with the Rob stories. Like, because you're right. And then they forced me to go back and like do the math, right? Yep. They were like, do me a favor, go back on, and how many posts has it been? How many words on average per post?
Exactly. Yep.
And so they forced me to go back and do something I had never done introspectively. And when you do the math, it's like, oh shit, right? Like, so the posts they average, it doesn't mean they average about 150 to 225 words per.
Yep.
And I've literally now tonight's Rob story will be 3,320 or something in a row. So I've literally like, then they're like, oh, the average book that like the first time or early author writes is like 40,000 to 60,000 words. Right. Yep. And you, sir, have written, do the math. You, sir, have written like 165,000 words.
Exactly.
So what they're talking about doing, which would be amazing if we pull it off, is taking them out in like sections, whether they be by like chronological or by theme or life moment or experience or part of the journey, and then kind of doing like a Jack Canfield, like Chicken Soup for the Soul kind of series.
I used to love those books. I actually read the
So
Chicken
did
Soup
I.
for the Soul books growing up. And I think
mean,
the themes thing is super interesting because I think life has a lot of themes in it. And a lot of the themes that happen in our lives
right?
tend to happen to everyone, even though the scenario within the theme might be different.
And if because you read them as a young guy, like remember, no disrespect to Jack Canfield and the publishing empire that he created,
Yes.
but from a writer standpoint, I went back and looked at them again. I was like, oh shit, like he didn't write, like Chicken Soup for the Soul, the original one, isn't like 200 pages of his original words.
Wow.
He's sharing anecdotal stories of other people, and then he does like an intro or a header or a theme.
Exactly.
And so the ideation with us so far this last month or two is like, okay, wait a minute. So what if we organize them in sectional ways, and then you're just writing kind of contemporaneously today. Here's the framing on that. But oh, by the way, here's the story of this young guy Josh that I met on Twitter, and like that
would be a super interesting concept. Right? I think that sounds like a very interesting concept. Like you said, if we can, it's really not if you can pull it off, as if you want to pull it off.
And frankly, this is where I trust the smarter people around me who are good at the things they're good at that I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, like I've written them all, and I'm going to keep writing them. So you've got 9 years worth of my words and my life experiences, and in a lot of cases, you got a picture or a video to go along with it. Right.
Yes.
So like in the modern media, how you could reproduce and share that. Like I'm all for that, because it was a self-serving thing when I started. I was doing it as a mechanism to help me stay accountable to things that I wanted to do in my life at the time,
Yep.
at the very like 2015 when I started these. But then it clearly a couple of years in became a thing where I was being told by people, and it doesn't need to be millions. It could be 5, but like
Exactly.
being told by people that just my sharing, my context on life, my lens was meaningful to them, and it was helping them shape a perspective on. And I was like, okay, well, I'm clearly going to do these for the rest of my life then. Like if there's one person out there. So now this iterative step to me is just like you and I thinking about it like we would about any project or product. Like it's like,
Exactly.
oh, well, why wouldn't we explore with people who know what they're doing? Why wouldn't we explore just packaging those things up in a different format so that we can share them with more people? Right, like that. That's the fun of it for me. So
I think we just showed your audience entrepreneurial thinking.
Boom! Look at you. Mic drop. Okay. All right, Mister. Before we do this all afternoon, how can people find you or follow you on social, and or if you want folks to find Tradeway, where do they go?
Yeah, so I'm Joshua Ogundu on LinkedIn, X, formerly Twitter. If you are on TikTok and want to see the TikToks that Rob alluded to, I am Silicon Valley. That's 2 L's, Silicon Valley on TikTok. And then, Tradeway, tradesarethe.com if you want to check that out. We're on LinkedIn, obviously. You can check out the first iteration of the marketplace. Our productivity tools are not yet live. But they will be coming to a website and a construction site near you sometime soon.
That's awesome. I look forward to having you back on in the future when some of those things are live and you're out there in the industry with clients and working on things and learning and iterating then. So we can talk about that. And also then that'll be an interesting perspective, because maybe it's 6 months or a year from now, and we'll see how it's all played out with our rebuild that we'll be in the middle of here in Los Angeles. So
Exactly.
But thank you, buddy. It was all the best. Thank you, man. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.